Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Retail Refresh, the show where we talk about everything to do with retail, media, and technology. I'm Sabrina, and I'll be one of your hosts today.
And I'm Rob. I, too, am a host.
Yeah, but Rob, do you ever wonder about who you are aside from being a host?
Wow, that's a little bit deeper than I expected for this show. I mean, sure. I think that's one of those inescapable parts of life as a human, always wondering about who we are and what our place is in the world or even the universe for that matter.
Yeah, me too. It makes me want to sing. Who am I?
No, we're not going to do that. We have a strict policy against this being a musical show, Sabrina, and you know that.
Right. Sorry.
The good news for you is that today's episode is all about audience segmentation and measurement and also shopper engagement. So we're going to be talking about how retailers can better understand what kinds of shoppers they've got in their stores and how to use that information to more effectively deploy in-store retail media that has a big impact.
Somehow that helps. Thanks, Rob.
You got it. Our guest today is Mitch Wade, VP of Sales for North America for Quividi. He has a long history of success leading teams in the computer vision and commerce strategy arenas for products used by some of the biggest brands and retailers in the world. And he worked directly in retail for more than 25 years. He's also just a good friend to us here at Broadsign. So, Mitch, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Sabrina. Great to be here.
So, to provide some context for our conversation, can you give us a quick explanation of what it is that Quividi does in the retail space?
Sure. So Quividi has been a pioneer and a leader in both the do space and the retail space for over 16 years now. Founded in Paris in 2005, we are we basically are an audience measurement platform using computer vision sensors to capture real-time audience impressions and basically shopper measurement. So in retail specifically, we've got two solutions. One would be our audience measurement platform, AMP, which is used to really support retail media networks, of which we've worked with a number of retailers and brands. And the second being our PMP, another acronym, but a performance merchandising platform, not just using a camera sensor, but also a LiDAR sensor. So we're able to understand product picks and understand the full funnel at a point of purchase or a gondola, to understand passersby all the way down to the assumed product pick into a basket. So again, two solutions in retail, one that's really focused on retail media and helping to optimize the retail media network, and the second one tapping into the merchandising for retailers and brands.
Great. So let's start at the beginning here, Mitch. Let's say we're rolling out digital displays inside of a store. How should we go about selecting placements for screens?
So we would certainly, we believe in test and learn. We believe in a phased approach, but I think so two specific ways we would recommend going about that would be one, using the camera and sensor in specific locations in order to optimize location, or in order to really audit and understand where the traffic would be, in order to optimize where screens would be or surfaces would be. The second would be, and so I think that in terms of screens and screen placement, and we can also get into content strategy, not to jump ahead, but I think ultimately knowing what content should be on screens at the entrance of the store or in the dwelling area of the store. So helping to really optimize content strategy would be a second way I would recommend going about it.
Can I ask a bit, because you mentioned that you recommend a kind of test and learn approach. So what does that test and learn approach look like? If I'm deploying screens as part of the test phase of that, how long should I leave the screens there? What should I be looking for to make a determination about where to move the screens or whether to leave them exactly where they are?
So I think that it would just be, I think you want to give it a few weeks or try to, you don't want to, I think there's got to be a period of time that's long enough to be able to capture enough data and be able to test and learn. But to me, I think that you'd want to have it be there for a few weeks in order to really capture enough data in order to be able to provide enough insights in order to then have actionable insights, basically.
That makes sense. And what about screen types, right? There are different types of screens we could deploy in stores. Are there different options that exist that are better for some situations?
So, look, I mean, we are an audience measurement platform. We can work with any screen. Certainly, the screens that might be, we would say that you probably want larger screens at the entrance of the stores. You want to have obviously smaller screens in the at the shelf area or at an end cap type of a display. And whether it's the orientation of the screen, I think is another consideration. But certainly, the having the audience data that comes from those screens could help determine, again, and from a test and learn, maybe you want to have one screen that's a larger screen or a smaller screen, and then really test and see which one is actually providing the most the better metrics.
So earlier you mentioned computer vision. What is the advantage of using computer vision for understanding audience size and composition?
I mean, ultimately, I think we'd say, I feel like it's the most online-like, if I can use that term, way of measuring in store. It's real time, it's high fidelity, it's precise. We're measuring people, not devices, and I think ultimately it's accurate. And I heard another interview podcast recently where a leading retailer said that they need to have data that they can go back to their brands or their clients that they can trust. And I think ultimately the CV or computer vision and Quividi provides data that you can trust.
Related to that, you're talking about we're looking at people, not just devices. Obviously, privacy is a concern, particularly when camera sensors are involved. You guys can only speak for yourselves. So I'm curious, at least when it comes to Quividi's solution, what should people know about how this kind of data is handled?
So I think first of all, we're in the face and body detection, not recognition. Our technology is only doing detection, and we are not capturing. So 10 times a second, we're processing an image, but then we're in essence killing the image, and we're extracting the data. So it's anonymized data. We don't track people. We just, whenever a person passes, we are then we're counting as a new person. So we're not tracking again. There's no people tracking. And we are a French company, or we come out of Europe, and we're GDPR, the world of GDPR. So I think we're extremely pro privacy, and so I think ultimately we're even though we use cameras, we're not using cameras as you would think of cameras being used. So again, we're just capturing data, and I think just to emphasize that is that the amount of data we're collecting, because we get asked that question a lot, is minimal, because it's just basically an Excel or a CSV file.
So in other words, the Minority Report vision from that movie from 20 years ago, that's not what people are going to expect to see with this kind of system.
No, we're not going to say, "Hey, Rob, here's we're having a sale on this brand," because or to comparing you to Tom Cruise, by the way. But yeah,
apt. Thank you.
So, Mitch, what would be the benefit of doing this ongoing audience analysis?
So I think ultimately for a retailer, and brands, it's got to drive incrementality. It's got to drive lift, and I think that ultimately having the right data and having, again, the data you can trust is going to, and I'd like to think also having that become an industry standard, which is something we hope it will be the case. We think will be able to drive the incrementality that retailers and brands are looking for.
Great. So it's really going to allow retailers to accomplish a lot more on the business level, build the relationships with their brands, giving them audience information or audience demographics that they can trust. Anything else in terms of a business level to help retailers?
Well, I mean, I think you just said it, but just to reemphasize that is that we're capturing. I know I've talked about impressions, but we're also trying. We are also are we understand demographics. We understand which I think, and also just to add into this, the ability to integrate with third-party data sources, I think enriches the data. So whether that be location-based services, let's say like a Placer AI, loyalty programs, POS data, or even even mobile data, ultimately gives, I think, a retailer and a brand the ability to have let's call it create campaigns that are richer, that I think ultimately they're looking to do. And again, I think it creates a more of an on-like type of an approach, which from what we're seeing, the online or the e-commerce folks in retail are playing a more important role. And I think ultimately the goal, I would hope, would be a holistic online, mobile, in-store shopper experience.
And to do that, you need to understand your in-store audience as well as you understand it online, right? So it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of creative implications to this earlier, so I definitely want to come back to that now. What becomes possible on a creative level when you have a better understanding of what your audience looks like at any given time?
So you can basically have, and this is where clearly us and Broadsign, but I mean, ultimately what I think is the more interesting piece here is that we talk about integration, but it's really Quividi and Broadsign, or the CMS, having a conversation. And it's basically hey, Quividi, Broadsign says they want to serve up this content. What will the audience be like? And we can then say, well, here's the audience, what either historically this time of day the audience is like, or in real time what it's like. So then you can get into influencing the playlist and having it be more contextually relevant content. And even though I know you talked about Minority Report, you could get into, at certain locations, say at a POP, you could get into a bit more of a triggering kind of a content, where if somebody's grabbed a product, you can get into a lift and learn situation, or if they put the product back, maybe there's an upsell of that behavior. In other words, now showing something from shelf number 2 or 3. So there's a lot that you can do here that then gets into really showing the right content, the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We've talked to some people who said that they're still seeing a lot of retailers, essentially playing the same content everywhere in the store at the same time. And it's like, if you take a little time to do some day parting, to play different content in the right spots for particular segments, you can get a lot more bang for your buck, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, without question. I think that the one to many or versus a 1-to-1 type of an approach, you're going to get far more. You're going to have, and I think ultimately, this is where I think the shopper. And to go back to the question, Sabrina, you asked about, kind of what do we need to do or what's the right strategy. I think that ultimately, there needs to be the customer experience has got to be a paramount to everything that's being done here, without question. But I think ultimately, if I'm a shopper and I'm in a store, I would like to see things that are going to be relevant for me, and kind of this, they sort of know me, and I think for brands you trust, I think that you want that experience.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about content strategy, screen placement. I'm curious to hear, Mitch, do you have any advice for retailers who are looking to get started with in-store digital media?
I mean, what I would just say is that we we don't know what we don't know, or at least, that to me is, I think it's very nascent is the word I hear for in-store retail media networks right now. I think it's a crawl, walk, run approach is the right. I think is one a phased approach is the right one. I've heard feedback from key retailers who say that this is still they're in startup mode, and I think when you're in startup mode, you got to test and learn. You've got to try new things. You've got to see what works. And I think that ultimately, what I would say is for retailers and brands to take that approach, to think of that, because that's really the innovative approach that's needed right now. So, I think that, I think it's an exciting time right now. Everybody is talking retail media is going to explode, and without question it is. And we're excited to take part in some of the events coming up to promote, retail media and have conversations with retailers and brands. But I just think that I think you got to innovate, and I think you've got to test and learn. And I think that's the key thing I would say.
Great. Thank you for that.
So maybe let's give our audience some inspiration. We like to end each episode by asking our guest about their vision for a cool in-store digital campaign. And we obviously want to try to tie it to what you guys do at Quividi. So what would a good campaign using computer vision and audience analytics tech look like to you?
So I think it would be incorporating all the things we talked about. I think that it should be, I think you got to be focused on the audience and measurement and using measurement. Our measurement is, we think it's strategic and important, but we think that us with other measurement sources is also important. So I think ideally having our data combined with POS data and or loyalty data, I think is great to have for attribution. Because you get into timestamp of what somebody saw versus then what's happening at the till. But I think ultimately, if you're talking the full Monty, I think that you really need to think about the online strategy, and obviously the online dollars and in store, and having that be I don't know if the word, if you want to call it harmonized, but I think basically that those two working in concert. I think that to me, and we're not in the online space. I mean, we're not measuring that naturally, but I just think that to me, if I was a retailer, head of retail media, is where I would be trying to look to get to. But that to me would be, I think it's important that we always look at it from a shopper point of view. And, basically if I'm shopping online and then I go into the store and I'm seeing things that are in concert, I think that to me is much more powerful. So that to me is what I would say is just having it be that, and I haven't used the word omni-channel, but, I know it gets, but I think it's got to be an omni-channel type of approach.
I prefer the word omni-channel over Minority Report. I think you both owe $5 in the Minority Report jar now.
I think that's most of what we had planned for a discussion. Do you have any final, parting words that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think just that, look, I've been in retail for many years. I started my career in retail. I met my wife at Nordstrom in LA. I was working, but I was in retail. Retail's in my blood, and I really I think this is an exciting time to be in retail. And honestly, I just think that look, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens here over the next few years with in-store retail media. So.
Fantastic. If people want to connect with you or follow Quividi, what are the best places for them to go to do that?
Just mwade@quividi.com, or email, or we will be, at upcoming events, and we'll be posting those on the social media, on LinkedIn and things like that. So I'm sure they'll be able to track me down.
Fantastic. Mitch, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation.
Thanks you so much, Mitch.
All right. That's it for today, everybody. Don't forget to come back in a couple weeks to see what else we have in store for you.